Welcome, everyone. We are so excited here at Sovereign Bodies Institute to have our fourth and final roundtable discussion today. We are so excited to have a group of amazing women to talk about their voices and experiences. So first, what I'd like to do is I'm going to turn it over to my Ina Ethelene, who's going to do an opening prayer for us.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mitaku Yepi, my relatives, Michinkshi, my son, all of you. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this very important discussion. I'm Shina Ikik Chumi, Takes Robe Woman, and I'm Oglala Lakota. I'm also part Crow. I live in Porcupine, South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And I'm so happy and honored to be here. So I'm going to offer the blessing in my language, Lakota language. Tunkashila, leampetu wopila tkanka unkeni chalpi. Grandfather, grandmother, creator, we thank you for this day. Tunkashila unchi wopila le omniche unhapikte ki oyakapikte. We ask that you bless this gathering. Tunkashila unchi Mitakia pilana yuha woanglake, we chose anani wash ake, we chakupie. Grandfather, grandmother, creator, we ask that you bless each and every one of us in this virtual circle and that you give us strength, wellness, we chose any health, courage, and protection. Tunkashila uchi, we ask that you take all of the sickness that is surrounding us and in us and take it somewhere where it won't hurt anybody. We chokuja hena tukdel manil ikpeapi hechel 20 el yinkashni. Mitakuye oyasi. All my relatives, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Ina. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Anita.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for people who are further east than me. I'm over in California, so it's still morning for me. My name is Anita Lucchese. I'm Executive Director of Sovereign Bodies Institute. We are a nonprofit research center focused on gender and sexual violence against Indigenous peoples. And very briefly, I just want to say it's such an honor to get to have SBI host this webinar today. There's some truly amazing women on this panel, and I know they have just a wealth of information and stories to share and teachings to share with us. So I'm thankful to each and every one of them. And just to say very briefly, I actually had a woman who's a friend of mine messaged me yesterday, and she's Indigenous, and she messaged me and said, my child just came out as trans, and I'm so excited for this webinar because I'm trying to figure out how to support them and how to love them and make their journey safe and full of love. And this is a resource that I didn't know existed, and I'm so excited to share it with them. So I know that this webinar is happening at the perfect time, and that there's little baby Indigenous trans youth tuning in with us today. And I hope that this is a bright light for them to know how loved they are and how cherished they are. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our facilitator, Maddie.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Yate, she Maddie Jim and Shen, Ajitanen Shleo, Kia Ani Bashindo Tobahanta Shedon. Hi everyone, I'm Maddie Jim. I'm of the Zuni People Clan, born for the Towering House People Clan, and I'm originally from a place called Tanaushan where I grew up. So I'm happy to be on here. I will be your moderator for today. I wanted to first of all thank Sovereign Bodies Institute for being inclusive and having our group be a part of this. So like they said earlier, we're gonna have a great event today, a webinar, and we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff within our communities. There were so many topics that we were thinking about, and then also asking questions. So hopefully we can share with you a lot of information, give a lot of education on working with Native trans populations, or even just experiences of some of our Native trans Indigenous populations within not just our nation or country here, but also in different regions and also globally. So we're gonna go ahead and get started because we have a jam-packed full agenda. So let's go ahead and just introduce our panelists. If they could say their name, where they're from, and what they do within their community. So let's start off with Renee.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Renee Gray, and I currently live in Gallup, New Mexico, a small town just 2 hours west of Gallup. I identify as Native Navajo transgender woman, and I have lived an experience that has been lived experiences of racial discrimination, incarceration, homelessness, addiction, sexual assault, near-death experiences, and survival work. And so my life work has really encompassed a lot of that personal experience that I've dealt with, because I felt that no trans woman should have to deal with those issues on their own, especially when it comes to incarceration and coming out of that. And so I'm here to give light to a lot of the stories that are untold, never heard, and I'm here as a person who has lived through all of that, and I'm a survivor, so I'm here. Thank you again for inviting me, and I appreciate and honor that you've asked me to be here. Thank you again.
Thank you, Renee.
Yes.
Yes. And let's now go to Alea.
Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. First but foremost, I'd like to acknowledge my spirit name, she who collects medicine for the people and she who works from the heart for the people. I come from the Lynx clan. Like I said, my name is Alea McIver. I am from Canada. I'm a survivor of sexual exploitation and human trafficking, and some of the work that I do in Canada is in relation to exploitation, human trafficking, missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two spirits. And I work for government.
Thank you. Bianca?
Aloha, everyone. My name is Bianca Tasaka. I hail from the Hawaiian Islands. I'm a native Hawaiian, Mahuvahine. What I do on my island, I'm a transgender medical assistant that provides trans care to our local Native Hawaiian trans individuals here on island. We have about a handful of clients that we help here, as well as doing HIV, STD, hepatitis testing and treatment for the island through the Department of Health here where I live on the island of Kauai. And we have other great, wonderful organizations on other islands that definitely help in this work that we do. And with that said, thank you for having me today. And I hope we have a great conference. Thank you for having me. Aloha.
Thank you. Thank you, Bianca. So thank you for being on here, and thank you for agreeing to be part of this. So I forgot to tell people what I did for my living. So I'm currently the supervisor for HIV prevention programs here at First Nations Community Health Source in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So we provide HIV prevention services, we do harm reduction. I've been doing HIV prevention for over 20 years and also have been doing advocacy for that amount of time too. So I've been very active within the communities, been very active in a lot of committees and doing a lot of things throughout the nation and doing some of the work that we do. So I'm really honored also to be your moderator today and to be a part of this for our voices and experiences of Indigenous transgender women. So we're gonna go ahead and start with our first question. And I'm gonna have Bianca start this one off, and we can have the other two jump in after. So what violence do you see in your areas, and what has been done to address those challenges?
You know, in Hawaii, we do experience those traumas in our community. With that said, it's great to have some some liaison and allies in other spectrums of work and organizations that can help our trans and Mahuvahine here in Hawaii to transition and navigate through the services, because I do find that sometimes it's really hard for our community to seek out service, especially when time of trauma. It's great to have allies in different organizations, in the fire department, in the police, and so forth. So we get that adequate care and service for our trans that are experiencing trauma. Thank you.
Renee?
Hi. So the violence that I've experienced in my life definitely does speak to the fact that we are a population that is not served adequately. We're not seen as people. We're not seen as part of the population because we're dying at high rates, and people don't see that, don't hear about that. We hear about other people dying at a higher rate, but when it comes to the Native trans women, we're basically just put in that position of other, or we're labeled as other. And so the experience, the violence that we definitely have to deal with, we have to endure it, or we either fight against it. And a lot of the Native trans women, and especially myself, we've definitely fought that violence, and we choose not to be our voices to be taken away from us. And we've lived here, we've been here far too long for our voices to be silenced. And so you can definitely see that in our resilience and our livelihood, despite that we're having to experience homelessness, we're having to experience inadequate healthcare, and all of these disproportionate statistics that we have to see in our Native trans lives. We definitely have to endure that every single day, and because we don't want our voices to be silenced, we still continue to live, because our existence definitely is our resistance.
Thank you, Renee. Leah, do you want to add to that? Alea?
Sorry, I had to unmute.
Oh.
Sorry about that. So as a trans person, not only a trans person, but in my region and also like in general all across the globe, I think when it comes to trans people, they're more susceptible to violence just because of their sexuality. Therefore, there is no safety net, no safety security net with service providers to walk alongside with them. Also to, I think moving forward, is understanding and acknowledging, and for each First Nations community or each tribe, to acknowledge the fact that, these people exist, and instead of shunning them, wrap your arms around them and continue loving them moving forward, because they're more at risk of going missing or being murdered also, and or falling into the cracks of the system of sexual violence, exploitation, human trafficking, all of that stuff.
Thank you. So I just wanted to mention to our audience and our participants that I know we just jumped right in with that question and stuff and really thinking about it, but within our communities, I feel that we're constantly talking about this or experiencing this. So sometimes we become just, I feel like comfortable in talking about these issues or challenges within our community. So I just want to say that this is a safe space also, and then that if you feel that you're reminded or triggered by some of the stuff that we talk about, to seek out someone to talk to, or if you need to go somewhere and recenter or reground yourself, please do that, because some of the topics that we're going to be talking about sometimes may be a reminder for someone and stuff. So just to get that out there. And then also I wanted to say that at the end of our presentation, we're going to have time for questions, I believe, for 15 minutes. And if you want to ask questions, please type it in, send it. And Lenny Hayes is going to be asking those questions at the last 15 minutes of this this event. So So we'll give time for that also too, because I know there's going to be questions that are going to be asked. People are going to come up with questions because we always have questions, especially within our trans community. When we do trainings, we get a lot of questions from our community. So I just wanted to also address that. So our next topic, next question I wanted to ask is going to start with Renee, and it is, when sexual assault occurs in our Native trans communities, what is done and where can one go for service or care?
So sexual assault, sexual violence is something that is fairly new to me, that has happened to me. And it took me some time to actually cope with the idea and understand and accept the fact that it did happen to me. So with that said, I definitely had no way of coping. And so my coping mechanism was to go get drunk and get high. So that was my way of coping with my sexual assault, my sexual violence that happened to me. And it is fairly, that's fairly new, and it definitely does put me in a position of being uncomfortable talking about it, because I'm still trying to deal with it. I'm still trying to accept 100% that it did happen to me. But I was fortunate enough to have great people that I worked with that I was able to turn to, and I was able to really open up and say, this happened to me. And they basically took me by my hand and led me to a sane nurse, and they never left my side. And so they were able to really be there with me from beginning to end. And it's I'm so reminded. Certain things do definitely remind me of that night that happened, and there are times where I'm just sitting here in my own silence, thinking about the things in life, and I get flashbacks. I get these new reminders of what happened, and then again at that moment, I have to remember what my coping mechanisms are, and I choose not to do those, and so I have to find ways to help cope with it. And when these new reminders come about, I have to again relearn how to deal with it. And so it's a continuous process that I have to deal with. Sometimes it becomes overwhelming that I have no way of dealing with it, and so I go the easy way out and I cope with it through alcohol and drugs. And again, but I think when it comes to the trans community, I think when you actually think about the sexual assault that happens within the Native trans community, like, we're left to have to deal with those sexual assaults. We're left to deal with those traumas on our own, because we don't have that luxury to go and seek help, seek therapy, seek counseling, because we're constantly having to live in a life that constantly pushes us to survive on a daily basis. We can't just stop and listen to our souls and our heart, our broken hearts, and then go turn to a counselor. We don't have that luxury, because we have to go out there and make money for this evening's dinner, this evening's meal, tonight's hotel stay, our next fix, because we don't have that job that will give us that luxury to do that. And so we're constantly left in this survival mode, and we have to put our traumas on the back burner, and that's where it's at, and that's where we keep our traumas until those traumas overboil. They boil over, and then when that happens, where do we go? Who do we turn to? Who do we talk to? Because we suffer, we experience some of the most inadequate healthcare services here, and the lack of services that is available for trans women, trans people. We're left to have to deal with those. Where else do we turn? How else do we deal with those? We go back to the streets. We go deal with alcoholism. We deal with substance use abuse, and that's just the life of a trans woman who is constantly in survival mode, and someone who suffered from a traumatic experience.
Okay. Thank you, Renee. Thank you. Deep breath, sisters. Deep breath. Deep breath. So I want to turn it over to Bianca. Do you want me to ask that question again?
Sure.
When sexual assault occurs in our Native trans communities, what is done and where can one go for services or care?
Thank you. That's actually really a touching, kind of a hard question, because I think some of us trans have experienced that, nor we even talk about it like I am going to share with you all today. I have experienced that, and it went undocumented or untold because in certain, where we live, it kind of goes under the rug. We kind of don't want to go and get those services because of who we are and how we might be treated in different areas of trying to get an exam, or just trying to be acknowledged in the right gender or who you express as when dealing with those traumas. And I do understand some of what Renee is saying, that, you know, it's survival. We have to survive in this time. And sometimes, you know, it's hard to have to survive and dealing with trauma like that we can't share. And maybe this is those platforms to do so. But here in Kauai, I do believe that sometimes it goes unseen or untold. And that kind of happens in our Native community. And also I want to express that sometimes it's generational. It's been happening for years and going untold. And then, you know, but I want to say at this time in Hawaii, there are acts to protect us as trans individuals. So that's a good thing, that our wonderful, wonderful, great Kuana project at HHHRC, Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Coalition on Oahu, that has helped support our Native trans community here in Hawaii. And there are stepping stones to help our Native trans here in Hawaii. Also here on island, to keep on going on, is there's a place called YWCA. I'm sure there are some places in America that has those organizations that help those that are experiencing trauma. And they are quite LGBT friendly here on island of Kauai, and we definitely are sister with them to piggyback on, you know, any type of service that's needed to navigate it and not break any type of, how you want to say, like, fallout, I guess, you know, because I think our community needs to share or speak about it, because it's not healthy for us to be living in trauma and fear, you know. But with that said, I do believe now that I hope there are some places and that would be more open and applicable to care and services for trans that are experiencing sexual trauma, especially sexual trauma, because it's very hard for anyone to speak about this or talk about this. And where I work, we do the testing for the STDs and HIV as well. So I'm the direct connect if anyone is experiencing that type of trauma. So that's why I say sometimes it's great to have some sort of allies in different sectors of work that we have to make sure that our Native trans are getting that right steps into recovery or help that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Alea?
Hello, can you repeat that question again, please?
Okay. When sexual assault occurs in our Native trans communities, what is done and where can one go for services or care?
So I think there's a lack of services within our jurisdictions, like a lack of services that are tailored to trauma those trauma related forms of sexual violence. A lot of us face sexual violence on a daily basis. It's pretty unfortunate. I myself have experienced numerous counts of sexual violence. And one of the things for me personally is building those bridges within your circles and networks, and building partnership and planting seeds along the way. I think it's important. I don't really want to get too in depth with my sexual trauma and my sexual violence that have occurred to me. But one of the things, like, I would like to challenge the audience to build partnerships. And one of the things I did in Canada here with First Nations communities is we went in, and when somebody comes forward with a sexual assault and or allegations, we build relationships with neighboring communities, and the neighboring communities, if and when that person needs to get out of that community for their own safety, the community next door would host them. And I think, again, it goes back to that community safety net. Overall, we face a lot of violence, whether it's sexual, whether it's like violence, but yeah, overall, yeah, I'll leave it off at that. I don't want to take too much time.
Thank you for that. So yeah, so these questions may be difficult, and sometimes difficult in answering because of the experiences we have as Native trans women. And a lot of times with services and with places to go, there's far too less of them. But it really helps to have somebody who is connected and networking and within those communities, and knowing our regions is very beneficial. So like I said, there's like a lot of topics that we're going to be talking about today, and I'm going to kind of switch over and change to our homeless populations, which a lot of times we have different names for our populations now, because I like to call them unsheltered relatives, because yeah, because for Native communities, we come from somewhere, and there's always a home to go back to. So within our unsheltered relatives, and so I want to ask a question, and I want to start with Alea.
Yeah.
What is being done for our unsheltered trans relatives, and where can one go to seek services?
Well, in Canada, I really, like, right now where I'm from Manitoba and Winnipeg. Right now, there's a challenge with houseless people, with community stakeholders that are dismantling where they make home. They dismantled it, and predominantly a lot of the houseless folk there are GLBTQ folk, and dismantling them and trying to displace them when they're displaced already. So that's kind of some of the stuff that's going on here. But then there's networks within Canada. So there's this End Homelessness initiative that's supposed to be ending homelessness in 5 to 10 years. But that's all that's there, but it's not tailored or designed to trans folks. When we talk about trans individuals, I think we really need to look at policies and shift the narrative and challenge our government officials to start implementing policy around trans folk, because they seem to be forgotten about when it comes to certain issues and laws, policy and laws, challenging our people that are in power. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Renee?
Hi, so can you repeat the question again, Maddie, please?
So the question is, what is being done for our unsheltered trans relatives? Where can they go for services?
That's definitely a good question to ask. And someone who has definitely experienced homelessness. Despite that, I have done what has been required of me. I've gone off to college. I graduated from college, And so you would expect and think that someone with a college degree can easily find a job. But because of our high unemployment rate within the trans community, like we definitely have to find other means to survive, because we're not able to find the jobs that we want, or we're unable to get hired at the jobs that we need to get to survive. So we resort to survival work. We resort to underground economy, like selling drugs and whatnot, finding ways to basically to live every single day. And I think so the homelessness is definitely a huge issue within our trans community. And it's something that we're constantly having a discussion about, because we have trans women who are capable and who are educated, who are homeless and unsheltered. And I think we're not doing enough here. I think honestly, from a personal view, I don't think we're doing enough to help provide shelters for those who are already on the streets, because I think it's a very complex issue when it comes to unsheltered or homeless, when it comes to trans community, because again, going back to our lived experiences of having to deal with trauma and not having the luxury to deal with our trauma and going to counseling and whatnot, that in itself, I believe, is a huge burden on us as trans women, Native trans women specifically, from my experience, that we have that unresolved trauma that we deal with. And those traumas make us, or put us in a position that we're unable to hold jobs or need to do things that we need to do to survive, or to work 8-hour work shift. Those traumas definitely affect how we look at life, how we deal with life, and how we have to survive life, because it's constantly on our mind, but we have it in our back burner. I think it definitely makes us unable to deal with having to find work, whatnot. But I think also other issues that we would have to deal with, just because of the high unemployment rates, that we can't find work, so we resort to other means to survive. It really inhibits us from finding the necessary shelter that we need. And again, as a society as it is, I think we're not doing enough to help fight the homelessness that definitely plagues the trans community.
Thank you, Renee. Bianca?
Thank you. You know, what I have heard over the years in our Native community is that when one or our trans, houseless, or homeless, houseless and unsheltered community, are experiencing that, it's where to place our sisters or brothers, because we are placing them in communities or shelters where they're not being assessed correctly, or they're putting trans females are being put in male shelters, or that's sort of different mix-ups sometimes, and that can definitely be a barrier when seeking out shelter or service. I do actually believe here in Hawaii, we do have a high rate of trans homelessness in Hawaii at whole. I do know that in Oahu or Honolulu, there is a big homeless trans community there. But what's one thing good about us in Hawaii is that we have a sisterhood like any other Native community does. So if any of our sisters know that a sister is out there and experiencing houselessness or unshelteredness, we would go and check on those girls and make sure they're okay, or make sure they have water, or and it's just our nature as trans females to have that nurturing part of us, to know that our sisters are out there and experiencing these things and trauma. I like to say trauma because we are experiencing that daily. and trying to survive at the same time. But with that said, you know, back maybe a couple of years ago, there was a great project in Hawaii called Juliana Mamo. It was start by 4 great Mahuvahine trans women that are my foremothers, that we like to call them in Hawaii. Ashiana Hevelu, Hinale Moana, Roxanne Richards, Madeline Ashton, Kathy Kapua. These are women that has made wonderful, wonderful stepping stones for us in our community. And they have started our first Mahuvahine shelter in Hawaii. I mean, amazing. But obviously with funds and things sometimes that cannot keep up, you know, and so that fell out. But I think that is definitely vital in our Native communities, is having specific shelters for us. So we get that right care and ongoing service that we need to get back out in the community and society and feel comfortable and confident, you know, and if these shelters can provide that, I think it's definitely vital to have in our communities. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Bianca. So our next question, Renee kind of already kind of talked a little bit about it. So I'm going to segue into this next question and start off with Renee to answer this question. What is your experience in employment, and what changes can be done to get our trans relatives employed?
That's definitely thank you again, Maddie. Thank you again, Maddie. I think it's a complex question to have to answer, because I think we really have to look into trans lives and where they come from and what they're experiencing. I don't think it's just give them jobs and they'll be okay. I don't think it's that simple. I think we have to definitely start the healing process within the trans community, because again, we're dealing and we're holding and we're carrying so much trauma on our shoulders, that to give a trans person a job immediately does not solve all her issues. I think we definitely have to dig deeper than that. I think we have to work from a healing process and start from there, and move forward, because it's not a simple issue to tackle. I think it goes far beyond than just giving trans people jobs. I think we have to start with educating the public with who we are as trans people, and to really educate them and let them know that, you know what, we do come with a luggage, not baggage, but we come with luggages, a whole life of luggages of discrimination, trauma, and secrecy, being chased out of our family's home. Like we have so much stuff that we have to deal with, and we carry those in tow with us every single day of our lives. And I don't think it's a simple thing to do. I don't think just giving a trans woman a job will solve the issue. I think it's far more than that. And I think that in itself is probably a full day discussion of how to start the healing process for Native trans women. Because again, as I said before, we don't have the luxury to go and get therapy and get help and seek help, because we live in a everyday survival mode. And that I believe that survival mode definitely separates us from our true feelings, our actual feelings, to what we have to feel to live, to survive the day. I think it separates us from our true feelings, and that really inhibits us from actually wanting to do the things that we need to do in life, because we're constantly in survival mode. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Bianca?
Can you repeat that question, Maddie Jim, please? Thank you.
Yes. What is your experience with employment, and what changes can be done to get our trans relatives employed?
Again, I want to give light to a wonderful organization here in Hawaii, which is the Kua'ana Project that helps our trans community, especially on Oahu, seeking job referrals, helping them out with resumes. And if anyone needs any type of job, etiquette or anything like that, Kua'ana Project definitely helps our girls get to that. So they can achieve, they can be confident to go out there and sit there and get their, evaluation and get that job that they really want and dreamed about, and for here on Kauai, myself, I am definitely an ally. If anyone or any of my girls definitely needs to seek out services or employment, may it be resume or help looking for a job or even taking them, because sometimes we do have problems with transportation or even get to the appointment or trying to even get to our job. But with that said, it's great to have acts in place that protects us as trans individuals in the workplace. So we definitely do have acts that protect us here in Hawaii as trans individuals in the workplace. And there's no tolerance for that kind of behavior or discrimination in the workplace here in Hawaii. And with that said, on different islands, because we're separated by 7 islands, so we have great trans and mahu wahine leaders on different islands that definitely are the liaisons of our community that need to seek out any of these services. And like I said, if anyone is also experiencing discrimination in their jobs, we would definitely like to try to help them in navigating them to the right sectors of making sure they get the adequate help that they need. I hope that answered that question.
Yes, it did. Thank you. Thank you so much. Alea?
Hi. So I think for employment for myself, it was kind of hard at first to sort of tailor my employment. But overall, I think as a trans person, I think we really need to look inside institutions and look at them from a human rights lens and making sure that trans women, men, whose human rights are being honored within that jurisdiction. And I think one of the things for trans folk, a lot of us seem to be oppressed, and it's kind of hard. Like, I'm going to break it down. It's kind of hard for me to look back, because I challenged myself so much that I didn't have a role model, through the duration of my life, a trans role model. So, I challenge myself each and every day, to live a better life, to have employment, to live stable. It's a challenge every day. Like, I can go back to, that trauma piece, that trauma, and live in that trauma, but I don't want to live there. But overall, I think when we're supporting employment for trans folk, I think, again, looking at a human rights lens, when engaging with employers and employer sectors. I think too, when we look at jobs, we need to look at the mission statements, mission value statements of each institution, because if your values don't align with that, then that's probably not the right space for you. Again, because we're trans and our voices are pretty minimal, that we be treated equal with gender equal pay also, with just as our peers, for say. again, and support, whether a trans person is having troubles, whether it's transportation, or, for the rent, their first couple of weeks in the job, supporting them prior, before, and after is one of the key pieces. And it goes a long way. It really does. Also to, getting trans folks stabilized, whether it's home, like with a home and shelter, food in a fridge. One of the things, again, I'm going to echo is the role modeling. I didn't have a mirror to mirror, and again, looking at laws, codes, and, engaging with them in prompt, pre interview skills, because we tend to lack that, as trans folk, because we've had not been in the workforce for some time. But overall, I'm just grateful, like, for myself. It was hard to hold my position, but I continuously had an Indigenous woman that believed in me. Through my walks of life, I had a lot of amazing Indigenous women walk alongside me and help me in my journey. They never left me back there. They walk alongside of me. So yeah, I think moving forward, that's what we need to do when empowering our trans sisters and brothers.
Great, thank you. Good answer.
Hey, Maddie, can I add
Yes.
something?
Yes, go right ahead.
I do definitely know at this time during COVID, some of our communities is experiencing unemployment. And that is definitely a concern for our community as well as anyone else that is experiencing unemployment with COVID at this time. So, even helping navigate some of our trans individuals with unemployment, because that's just another process to deal with as well. But I think at this time, we also are experiencing unemployment due to COVID as well. I just wanted to add that in. Thank you.
So you brought up a good subject, Bianca, about COVID-19. So I want to hear the other two, Renee and Alea, about what's going on in your regions, especially with COVID-19 and what's happening within your regions. Renee, can you go first?
Yes, I can definitely go first. So I'm in New Mexico. I'm definitely in a hot spot, a hot zone of the United States. I'm close to the Arizona border, and I'm definitely part of the Navajo reservation, which has really affected us very much. And so it scares me. I'm feared by it. I choose not to be in public. I choose to just stay home and just not go anywhere. And if I do have to go somewhere, I definitely take some really severe precautions. I have hand sanitizer with me. I have a mask with me, and I'm constantly with a hand sanitizer. And I make sure that people they maintain their distance from me. I hate having to go to Walmart, but I think Walmart here in the Gallup area is definitely a one stop for everything. And it's hard to have to tell the people, especially your own tribe, your own people from your own tribe, have to tell them to stay home, because it mind boggles me that people don't see this as a possible death sentence, and they don't take it too serious. And I think really having to come into Walmart, which is a one-stop shop for everything, you see people who are not taking these precautionary measures to keep themselves from contracting the COVID-19. And I'm over here with my mask covered, my face covered, and I'm telling people, you need to keep a 6 feet distance, or at least 12 feet. And I'm making sure that I have that space, my bubble. You need to step aside. You need to keep your distance. Protect yourself. You're not only gonna only try to kill yourself, but you're going to kill others if you do contract this disease. I'm out there trying to promote that distancing, especially the social distancing. But it definitely is a scare for me. And to be near a region that is a hot spot of the United States, it definitely is scary. It really is scary. And I choose not to be in public too often, but if I have to go, then I definitely do take I do take some extreme measures to have to protect myself and my family. And I'm constantly having to basically yell at my parents because they're so stubborn. And I have to yell at them and tell them, you know what, if you want to go die, then go there. It's basically what I've said to my parents. If you want to contract that COVID-19, go. If you want that's it's gone to that point where they don't understand that this will kill you if you just basically in that same area and you breathe. That one particular breath will definitely kill you. So I definitely take some really strong measures to protect myself as well as my family. So it is scary. And
Okay,
that's life near the res. Near the
okay,
reservation. That's life here.
thank you, Renee.
Yes.
Aaliyah?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again? Something about COVID-19.
Around COVID-19, like what's going on in your area? Because different regions are experiencing different things. Like the Navajo Nation was the high rate, far more than New Jersey and New York at one point, and they were a very big hotspot in the nation. And then also looking at what Bianca said about how COVID is affecting our trans populations within Hawaii with unemployment. So what's going on in your region in Manitoba around COVID-19?
Well, I think our province was really proactive when COVID-19 hit. I honestly think we're in the second wave of it, to be quite frank. Therefore, our numbers are very low. We have probably like 300 and something cases. 8 people died from COVID-19. But overall, I think our Indigenous communities, our First Nations communities within Manitoba had really stepped up and barricaded their communities, no access in, to outside people. Therefore, they were securing the safety and well-being of people within those First Nations communities. What I'm seeing within the city of Winnipeg here is there's a lack of services that people would daily utilize. So they're wandering around. So they're lacking in a lot of areas right now, a lot of folk. I'm seeing a lot of people wearing no shoes. This seems to be a thing. In the past week, I counted about 24 people that weren't wearing shoes. So I'm assuming that when services do open up, we're in phase 3 right now, so services are starting to open up, but with caution. But overall, for our trans folk, again, in Manitoba, there's really no services for trans people. And therefore, they access one place for those who are entrenched in exploitation and or human trafficking. There's one place, but again, that door is closed. They're able to knock on a door, get food, and go on their way. But what I'm seeing is there's a lack of rapport within clients, right? And seeing where clients are at and seeing if clients are missing and or have been murdered. So we're lacking in a lot of those areas. And again, high crime is at its peak here in Canada, like in Winnipeg. During COVID-19, we've had Winnipeg police shoot 3 youth in a matter of 10 days. So yeah, overall, COVID-19's really affected Manitoba hard. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to our next topic in question. So this was kind of mentioned a little earlier, and it's around healthcare. So I want Bianca to start off with this question. And what is the climate in your area when it comes to healthcare and mental health services, and also your experience?
what's great about it is we definitely do have an act that protects us for healthcare. So trans individuals can definitely seek out healthcare without any discrimination through their insurance companies. And here in Hawaii, we have great Kaiser that has great services for our trans community here on island, as well as HMSA. With that said, it's hard to seek services as a trans individual, I think, anywhere. And what I notice now as a medical assistant is that having someone in that medical field definitely makes it an easier way for someone to seek out service, being comfortable in that setting, because it can be intense, it can be uncomfortable, anxiety can happen. But knowing that you have someone, even not just a trans individual, but I think if a trans individual is seeking out trans care, they definitely need to be helped with another trans or mahuvahine here, or an LGBT person in the medical field, because it makes great transition and care for that trans female or trans male that is seeking out healthcare services. Before, it was hard to access HRT services, human hormone replacement therapy. Some of us had to seek it underground. Some of us had to fly to another island to get hormone replacement therapy because we couldn't access this here on our islands. But with that said, I think with New Age and medical and different acts that protects us, especially here in Hawaii with trans care, we definitely can seek out those services. And if some trans individuals or mahuvahine don't have healthcare, they can come to any of our ASOs or CBOs that have usually a trans person on staff here in Hawaii that can help them set up medical services so they can adequately access medical care, and seeking out HRT services, or even if you're sick, just to, most of us trans individuals don't seek out medical care because of the way we are misgendered or what type of services we are seeking out, even if it's an STD test, and to see where we are, not because we're maybe high risk or so what, but we want to know, like anyone else would want to know. And so those are things that protect us here in Hawaii, such as different acts that protect us in healthcare in Hawaii. Thank you, Maddie.
Okay, thank you. Alea?
So I think in Manitoba here, we're really good in the Department of Healthcare for trans folk. We have a lot of medical professionals that are working collaboratively together. In core communities where there's a high number of trans Indigenous peoples. So yeah, there's like clinics here in Canada, well, in province of Manitoba, we have stickers that go on the door of healthcare providers, institutions, per se, if they're trans friendly. So I think overall, we just need to look at that and see if it's there. If not, then we just go somewhere else. But overall, I think Manitoba is good in that area when it comes to trans healthcare.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Renee?
Yes, hello again, everyone. I believe that healthcare services here in the Four Corner regions of the United States has definitely improved a whole lot than what it was before, because prior to this better so-called health treatment or health services for trans people, I had to hitchhike to get to my appointment, and I had to hitchhike maybe like 60 miles, or I had to travel from Gallup to Albuquerque, which is like a 2-hour drive. Definitely had to do that because services in the IHS regions in Gallup didn't provide hormone replacement therapy, or there wasn't doctors who were willing to provide those services to trans people. I also believe that currently right now, like again, like I said, that health services here in Four Corners region has definitely improved. There is a doctor here at the Gallup Indian Medical Center that definitely caters and provides treatment and services to transgender people all across the area. And so you have trans people coming from the other side of Navajo Nation, which is about 200 to 300 miles away, and they come to Gallup to get services. And I think again, it definitely has improved. But I believe we still have a lot of improvement. There's still room for improvements, because prior to coming to the doctor here in Gallup, I still had to educate my doctor on how to provide me with services when I needed to get my blood drawn for these certain checks, my body checks, like with my liver and whatnot. I definitely had to do that for a number of years. But 20 years on hormone replacement therapy, I've definitely learned to really advocate for myself when it comes to my health. But it is definitely a challenge to find that one doctor who will definitely relate to you in a way that will provide you great quality service. But when it comes to mental health, again, I think mental health is a foreign area of services that trans people are trying to get into, because again, we don't have the luxury to go and seek therapy or mental health services like that. It's something that we don't automatically want to seek, versus when we're having to get our hormone checkups, get our blood drawn, get our liver checked. Like we're not at that point yet, I believe, because I think us trans women feel that we are able to deal with our traumas on our own. And in my experience of reaching out and getting mental health services, I've allowed that help to definitely provide me with some insights in my mental health. But I find it a little I would rather have a mental health provider who definitely is trans experienced, or understands and really has had that trans experience, and really able to look and see my life, and able to recognize what I'm going through, and to acknowledge what I'm going through, and to see what I've gone through and deal with what I've gone through. And despite that, like I've definitely reached out and done mental health services, but that only survived maybe a couple of months, and that's it. But I think it is a challenge to find that right person who is able to help you deal with a lot of your mental health issues. But it is a new area that us trans women need to definitely seek, because we do have some challenges and we do have some traumas to work through. And I think mental health is definitely a new area that we need to seek. Thank you.
Hey, Maddie, Jim, I'm sorry. I just want to add another thing. Of course, that where I work here on Kauai at Malamapuna Health Services, we do provide trans services for men and female trans individuals. But I also did want to bring up trans healthcare that is being affected by our government. And I think that is definitely a concern for all of us in health that are seeking healthcare as trans individuals. So I just wanted to bring that up, that we are facing barriers in government with healthcare for our trans individuals.
Okay, awesome.
Can I add to, sorry, the mental health services? I think, I think we really need to remove the stigma and challenge each other to remove that stigma. Therefore, I think everybody suffers with some forms of mental health, but the stigma that's attached to mental health really isolates people not to seek help. So I just wanted to throw it out there and challenging breaking that stigma. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we're kind of like winding down to the last portions of the webinar. So we did have one question come in. It was around shelter. So I'm going to go ahead and read that, and if we can get some quick answers, because I think I have two more little subjects that I want to try to tackle before we start closing up and stuff too, because I felt that was kind of important. But very rich discussion today, a lot of valuable information and a lot of good education. So I'm very, very happy with that. So one of the questions that came up that they sent in was, are there more places available for trans and non-binary folks? Many times it's for a very binary male and female for housing shelters. Are there plans to expand to include all folks? Alea, let's start with you.
Well, again, you know, it's challenging those institutions within our jurisdictions, right? A lot of institutions, sorry, like to put this out there, but a lot of institutions go by the philosophy of Christian-based, right? Which really discriminates to trans folk, which misgenders them. So challenging that piece, for example, Salvation Army, right? So Salvation Army has gradually made a wing for GLBTQ folk, but you know, it was only 10 years ago that they started acknowledging the fact that when trans women go into treatment, whether it's detoxing from their DOC, they used to put them with males, but it was only like 10 years ago that we broke that barrier. And like in Manitoba, like overall, I think you know, there are places there, but we can do better. And I think we can do better collectively, globally. And again, it's challenging, you know, and rewriting that history that was written for us by white men, right? So, yeah.
Okay. Renee?
May you repeat the question, please?
Are there more places available for trans and non-binary folks? Many times it's for a very binary male and female for housing shelters. Are there plans to expand to include all folks?
I believe that's a question that really implies to only cities. I think when you go from Gallup to Albuquerque, because in Gallup you don't have these very particular services that are catering to specifically trans people. You have these services that are just open to everyone, or you have these offices that are LGBTQ friendly. You have these places that have these rainbow flags. I don't think you have those specific places where a trans person can go to a very trans specific organization here in Gallup, unless there's these meetings that provide these services. But I don't think there's any here in Gallup at the moment right now. But if you go to Albuquerque, which is a larger city in New Mexico, we're definitely fortunate to have the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico and Albuquerque that provides services, an array of services to the trans community. And majority of their participants or clients are Native trans women. So they go there to seek services for assistance to help them survive the day. But specifically when it comes to small towns, there really isn't. But I believe New Mexico is striving toward that better goal of providing more services for trans people as well as LGBTQ as a whole spectrum.
Okay, thank you. Bianca?
Her ducky.
Well, it varies on different islands in Hawaii. But here on my island, we definitely have a place that definitely people can seek out shelter. And as well as YWCA, they do have a crisis shelter for anyone that is experiencing any type of mental abuse, sexual abuse, or violence against women or trans. And they are definitely applicable in working with our community and sheltering them in case anyone is experiencing trauma here on Kauai. On different islands, I do believe if anyone is experiencing trauma, like I said, they can seek out care through the Kuana Project on Oahu, which is headed through the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Coalition of Hawaii on Oahu. If they need to seek out more services, they can contact the girls there at Kuana Project. And on different islands, there are different ASOs and CBOs that anyone can seek out if anyone is needing service for houselessness.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, I hope that answered the question for the person who was listening and typed in that question. So thank you for answering that. So I want to go towards MMIW. So I know with missing murdered Indigenous women, there have been organizations that have been including our Native trans populations, and very happy that they're starting to do that. So in your areas, looking at murdered and missing Indigenous women, how is that looked at in your area, and also how is there inclusion in your area? Because I know that we've had a discussion. I've had a discussion with Renee. I think I've had a discussion with Bianca around, like, we're talking about sisterhood, and we know who's doing what, we know who's going where and who's with who, and we keep track of our sisters in our communities. And so with missing trans women, I feel that I see less of that or hear less of that, but more of the murdered trans women, because I know of some of my friends who have been murdered and stuff. So how do you see that within your regions? And just give you a few minutes to answer that. Let's start with Bianca.
With that said, there are some cases in Hawaii that have gone untold or under the radar, but I think we definitely need to speak out more on these issues and concerns about our murdered and affected trans individuals that have been murdered or are experiencing these type of trauma to this day. But with that said, I do believe that, I think we definitely need to speak out more. And like I said, talking to you prior, Maddie Jim, is we have a great sisterhood here in Hawaii, like as any other Native or any culture would have, but definitely keeping a word out, kind of like coconut wireless, we call it here in Hawaii. Girl, girl, this Connie over here, watch out, be careful, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of like a coconut wireless. Everyone knows in the matter of a second. So that's one thing good about here in Hawaii. We have a great coconut wireless connection. Thank you.
Alea?
Yeah. So I think as you guys are probably aware that Canada had a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit peoples. I think for myself, it's been 16 years that I've been actively addressing trans Two-Spirit peoples when it comes to MMIWG. So in Manitoba here, we have had some of our sisters murdered, and there's one still actively missing. So for me, losing one of my best friends to violence in the survival sex industry really challenged me personally to continue on the work of drawing awareness to the issue. Because 16 years ago, when she was murdered, the issue wasn't really talked about. The issue wasn't really addressed. So for myself personally, again, we collectively here host the Sisters in Spirit March every year, along with the February 14 March. So I've been honored enough to be given this bundle to showcase the love, amplify the love that we have for our missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two spirits within Manitoba. And again, when we talk about NLIWG2S in Manitoba, Manitoba is ground zero in addressing it, not only addressing it, but acting on it and actioning it. So if you ever want to look into anything in relations to that, you know, look at Manitoba, where we lead the country in Canada when it comes to NYWG2S. Yeah, there's lots of great initiatives that we do for the families directly impacted to the issue. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Renee?
So when it comes to the missing and murdered Indigenous whole idea of it all, I think it's something that's barely coming to this portion of the state, especially when it comes to Gallup. I think it's something that people are barely learning about. I think they're really becoming aware of it, but it's not something that is very prominent when you go to larger cities like Albuquerque, because you definitely hear about it all the time and you definitely understand what it is. But I think here in the small town of Gallup and the reservation, I think it's something that's it's becoming an issue, and people are learning about it. But I think when it comes to the Native trans women, and when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women, I think when it comes to trans women, we're a very close-knit community. I think we always take care of one another. We always check on one another, and we always make sure that things are okay with them when it comes to living and surviving and having to do survival work. And so it's really hard to think about a Native trans woman going missing unknowingly and not knowing where she went, what happened to her, and why she went there. I think us Native trans girls, we definitely keep in contact with one another, and when we go somewhere, we definitely make sure that we tell them that, okay, I'm going to Denver next week, and I'll be there for a couple of days, and this is what I'm going to do. I think we definitely let people know where we're at. And so it's really hard to incorporate and to really understand that trans women do go missing and murdered when it comes to that whole idea of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I think one of the things that we, or some people, tend to really misinterpret is trans women are not forced. Trans women are not. They don't have to do survival work. We're pushed into that. We're forced to do that. We don't have a pimp who's telling us to do this and do that. We're not telling someone else to tell us to do that. I think trans women, because of our high unemployment rate and having to survive and make our own means to survive and to have our money, we have to do that to survive. And when it comes to the missing and murdered Indigenous women, we're not pushed by other people. We're pushed by society to have to survive and do survival work. And again, I think when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women, I think that whole idea, that whole concept, when it comes to being sex trafficked into sex work, is highly unlikely that a trans woman is being sex trafficked, versus society pushing us into doing survival work because that's our means of survival. I think that's something that a lot of people should definitely really consider, and wording, and how trans women have to be part of that missing and murdered Indigenous whole spectrum. I think we have to look at that, because trans women definitely do have to survive, and we do go into sex work for survival, and we're not sex trafficked, and it's rare that does happen.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So we are wrapping up to the final minutes. So I wanted to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you for a phenomenal discussion, answers and stuff. So your input is very valuable, and I thank you and I treasure that. And there's so many things that we could also talk about. We have so much that we could add to this and give more information. So I'm really happy with what we've done today. and to give out that information. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lenny because we only have a couple of minutes to close out. So I'll turn it back over to Lenny. So Lenny, go ahead.
Thank you, Maddie. I just want to thank all of you panelists. It was amazing to have this conversation. I just feel honored and blessed to sit with all of you and learn from you. I know we at Sovereign Bodies are just overwhelmed with so much, just learning from all of you. Again, I just want to say thank you, and I'm just like, my heart is filled. I mean, I've worked with a couple of you on different projects, and I've always been really amazed at the work that you do, that the two individuals that I know within, you know, transgender community, and it's just an honor to meet you, Alea, and an honor to meet you, Bianca, and I'm just eternally grateful that you all agreed to be a part of this panel. So with that, we are going to wrap up our roundtable discussion. And we are so thankful for the community being a part of this conversation. If you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact us at Sovereign Bodies if you have any questions or concerns. But overall, I just want to say thank you.